Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Raymond Comprehensive Plan Committee. Today is June 5th of 2024. I would like to note that we do have a quorum present, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. The first thing on our agenda tonight is the approval of our minutes from May 1st of 2024.
Move to accept the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
And that is approved. Thank you. Today we have the pleasure of a guest speaker, Robin Mullins. She is with the Lakes Region Chamber of Commerce, where she's been there, I think it's about approximately 8 years, 4 of which you've served as the executive director. I've planned for her to talk about 5 minutes today and then allowed about 10 to 15 minutes of questioning, just so everybody knows. Robin, you're more than welcome to step up.
All right, good evening. So I am Robin Mullins. I am the CEO of the Sebago Lakes Region Chamber of Commerce. We cover 8 towns. We cover the towns of Casco, Gray, Naples, New Gloucester, Raymond, Sebago, Standish, and Windham. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. I know you guys have a lot of work that you've already done and will continue to do on the comprehensive plan, and I want you to know that we at the Chamber are here to assist. Last night I was in the town of Windham. As many of you may know, the Department of Transportation is working with the town of Windham on what can we do about traffic on 302 in Windham. So I get a lot of feedback from our businesses, and I'm there to support and also to be a voice for our businesses, and I would love to do the same thing for Raymond. So if you need to reach out to Raymond businesses, or if you need me to help with feedback or any of that sort of thing, I'm more than happy to do that. I've also worked with the towns of Casco, Naples, and Gray on some projects that they have had going on as well. So the Chamber has about 306 members. We have about 20 businesses that are members from Raymond. The bulk of our businesses are from Windham. We do have businesses that are members throughout the state. However, we have some in Rockland and Portland and some other areas as well. People like to become a member of the Chamber because it will hopefully give them a little bit of networking and some visibility in the Sebago Lakes region. So I've been with the Chamber for 8 years. I've been in my role as the CEO for 5 years. I actually started that just about January of 2020. We all know what happened in March of 2020. So I have been very familiar with helping our businesses to succeed and to survive, and want to be able to continue to do that and want to be able to partner with our towns in order to do that. And Sue and I have met a couple of different times to talk about how we can, as a chamber, support the town. And one of the things that we do, we have our own 501c3, and we do support food pantries in the 8 towns that we have. And I want to let everyone know, we just wrote $20,000 in checks to the 12 food pantries that we have in the region. So we are very active in the region, and will continue to be that way. And I want you to know that I am here to support you guys in any way that I possibly can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
With the 20 businesses that we have in Raymond, do you hear, like, what is their most frequent ask or concern?
So it's interesting that you asked, because I actually emailed all of them and said I was going to be here, and I only heard from 2 businesses. And so that is actually a sign of the times. They are so busy and they get inundated with emails and things like that. Were I to do it again, I probably would have to physically walk in and ask the question, because I just think they are all so overwhelmed. It's hard because a lot of them are low on staff. But from the 2 people that I did hear from, they would like a little bit more support from the town. I think it was difficult for them in opening. They were both actually, it's interesting. One of them has been in business in Raymond for a very long time. The other business was fairly new. And the business that was new said it was difficult. It felt like it took longer to get her business open than she would have hoped for. So, specifically what that support is, I'm more than happy to sit down with her and figure out what that was, but that was her concern. And the business that had been here for a while, same sort of thing. They're really not really sure what's going on. And that's the other thing. It's like, they're not sure what's going on, but are they opening the emails that are being sent to them? So it's kind of a catch-22, right? But again, that's where I might be able to step in and actually go and have some one-on-one visits with these businesses and try to figure out what it is that they need.
Does anybody else have some questions for Robin?
Can you share what some of the projects were that you did recently with Casco and the other towns? In the
Yep. So
surrounding area?
Casco is also doing a comprehensive plan as well. And so again, it's just being there for support and being in. They have less businesses that are part of the chamber. Casco doesn't have a lot of businesses, so it's a little less of a need there for me there. In Gray, they have a, and I'm not going to remember what the name of it is. When there's properties that could potentially have hazardous materials on them, the brownfield, that's what it was. I was participating on them and looking at what buildings, what lots, those sorts of things would require brownfield study. And then if we decided that those were areas that we could reuse, what was that going to take in order to get all of the hazardous stuff off those so that we could use the materials and things like that. In Naples, I participate with them. There's a new town manager there, and he has been fantastic. He has been calling meetings every once in a while, and he's pulling all of the businesses together to talk about what is it that we could do better. What are your frustrations? And so it's really nice to be there from a chamber perspective in order to hear what it is the businesses are saying so that I can partner with the town on that. So that's actually been a lot of fun to do with Jason. And of course, Wyndham always has stuff going on, and I work very closely with Tom Bartel and the Wyndham Economic Development Corporation. And as I said, it's the Department of Transportation right now, but I've also helped on the sewer because they're getting a new sewer system as well. So,
Thanks.
great question.
Hey, Robin. I noticed that, so Raymond had a task force a few years ago, an economic development task force that they did a study and talked with a lot of the businesses in town about how they could be better supported and what they need from the town and everything. Did any of that ever make its way to you? Did it kind of stop in the town before it kind of made it over to the chamber to try and take any further steps?
So I honestly can't answer that question because, as I said, I've been in my role since 2020, so I don't know when that was done. I was the office manager prior to that, and I wouldn't have had access to it as the office manager. And unfortunately, the person that was in the position before me no longer has anything to do with the chamber. So I couldn't answer that question,
Okay.
but that would be interesting to know.
I know. They came up with a pretty comprehensive report about their findings, and it might be interesting to see if the businesses are still feeling the same way that they were at that point in time. And they did come forward with some recommendations for, how the town could help support them and create more networking events and things of that nature, make more of a business community in town. But it just kind of seemed like there wasn't anything that kind of came further from it. So,
Yeah, and that's another area where the towns can really partner with the chamber because we have networking events, we have things going on, and one of the things I've really tried to get when I sit down and talk with people, and Sue, I think we actually talked about this, is how do we not recreate the wheel? And everybody is so busy. So if you're having an event and I'm having an event in Casco, how do we find an event that we all can participate in? Greg is part of the Rotary Club with me, and we are trying to partner with the chamber so that it's hard to find people, right, to volunteer. So how do we partner? And so I'd really love to see more of that. And even between towns, when I started in 2020, obviously COVID was a huge deal, and we came up with the Keep Sebago Lakes Region Healthy Initiative. And we created signs, and we had PPE, and we had all of that stuff, and it was done as a region so that Casco didn't have to do their own thing, Raymond didn't have to do their own thing. We came up with a plan that worked for the entire region. So regardless if you drove through Wyndham or Gray or Naples, the signage you saw on how to protect yourself and to be safe was consistent through all of those towns. And so obviously you can't do that for every project, but if there are projects that overlap and we can do that, let's save our resources and work together. I think, to me, that's like for me, that's like, ta-da! Like, I would love to have that be the case, but yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, Robin, you mentioned the meeting you were at in Wyndham to discuss traffic on 302. I'm sure it's no surprise to you that every area that you represent has that same issue, and we've heard it loud and clear from the community here as well. I'm just curious. It seems to me that the key player in there is MDOT, and so are there any initiatives based on what you just said that are bringing, let's say, all of the towns that you represent together in some sort of a collaborative effort? Because my sense is that it takes more than just a village to move the main DOT.
You know, there really isn't. The gentleman who's in charge of the main DOT was there last night, and I'm sorry his name escapes me, but he and I actually sit on the Maine State Chamber Board of Directors together, and I never even thought of this until you mentioned it, but what a great idea, because I know Gray's having some issues, and they've been working with the Maine DOT, and I was just talking to one of your residents, because she was asking, you know, like, so what is Wyndham doing? And I said, you know, it would really behoove Raymond to know what Wyndham is doing, because, you know, the people don't just stop in Wyndham. They're continuing through all the way to Naples and Bridgeton and that sort of thing. So I love that idea, and I'm sure that the Maine DOT would probably be open to even sitting down and maybe having a conversation about what does that look like, because, you know, yep, that's great, we get them through Wyndham, but then what happens after that? I live in Otisfield, so I drive from Wyndham through Raymond, you know, on my way up to Otisfield, and so I know what it's like to, especially on a Friday afternoon, right, when it's a holiday weekend.
Sure. There actually was a group of several of the towns back a few years ago that were basically congregated around that idea of how to improve traffic flow and safety on 302, but that seemed to have evaporated.
Yeah, I love it. And then again, that's why if we can find a way for us to all collaborate so that, you know, if we're all working on it individually, it takes a lot more resources, whereas if we can try to find some way to come together, it certainly makes it. And I know that that's pie in the sky, and it's not an easy thing to do, but I think it can be done if we just put our minds to it.
Thank you.
I'm a glass half full, and it's almost to the brim. And
I'll drink to that.
Anybody else have any other questions? We have a few more minutes.
Has there been any feedback maybe from any of these towns related to the staffing shortages, and maybe any solutions any of the companies have had?
So I can tell you that staffing is actually better this summer than it was, and I think I'm not exactly sure why that is. I do know that the state has tried to have, whether it's apprenticeship programs and opportunities for people to, for kids to come in and do, like we actually had a couple of kids come in and they did school internships with us. So I had a couple of projects that I needed to have done. I'm a nonprofit, don't have a lot of money. So it was an opportunity because the state even paid for the kids to come in and to do those internships. So I know that has definitely made a difference as well. So I think the state has really tried to do some of that stuff. We as a chamber have been partnering with the school system. RSU 14, and I went in and did some, hey, you guys are going to go and do some mock interviews. So I did mock interviews with the kids. So trying to find those sorts of partnerships, I think certainly helps. It's better. It's not great, but I do think it's better this year than it was, and hopefully it will continue to get better.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Just real quick, summing up what I think I just heard was that we'll need the follow-up of this committee, which winds up when, Pete, in another 6-7 months?
Oh,
8
yeah,
months?
we finish up in January, I think, this coming year. Voters vote on it in June.
And so, in hopes that it would pass a year from now, there'd presumably be an implementation committee that would come into play to implement the findings we've all come to. And it seems like we want to be well prepared for that committee to staff up and chase the real things that are going to need to be chased, like federal money, state money, that these towns don't have the bandwidth so much to chase. Environmental stuff, climate stuff, weather stuff. however we want to call it. So this is a nice shot across the bow at this time, and I would hope that we could keep an eye on a year from now, and as we build the next steps of this committee's efforts, and hopefully chase opportunities for funding to help implement some of the changes that we'll be recommending, and that I'm sure DOT is going to be part of that.
Yeah, and it will be next year before you know it, right?
Yeah, I would just echo what John is saying as far as, and we've recognized it for a while. We've been into this a good 18 months, and the work really is just to guide the implementation committee. So it's going to be riding herd on that committee to see how much of what the results we get out of this committee actually gets implemented.
Thank you, Peter. All right, thank you, Robin, very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and I wish you guys luck. It's quite an endeavor that you guys are taking on, but it's a very important one, so good luck to you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Robin.
All right, next on our agenda is public comment, and we do have some people. So if you would like to speak, please come up to the podium and just tell us who you are and where you live.
Hi, John Stetson, 16 Merrill Road. A question for, I guess, for Peter Levitt and for Robin Mullins. With when you were just saying, with collaboration with the Department of Transportation, referring to 302, I'm wondering what the it could be when you say it could be done. What can be done is magically, will there be less traffic on 302 in the future?
I think that's a great question. I wish I had the answers for it. I mean, I've got a lot of my own personal feelings.
When people say, if we collaborate, it'll be great, but
Well,
what is the it?
I think my sense is to move any state agency, it takes more than one town to do it. And so certainly,
I don't know what the it is.
well, the it would be ways to slow the traffic down. It would be ways to have safe sidewalks in areas where there's commercial endeavors. It'd be a situation where you're looking at, we'll be discussing later, the village concepts and linking villages through bike paths and walking paths. Anything that'll possibly take cars off of the road. I know that there's some talk in Wyndham about trying to work it such that they can work some sort of a bypass around the shopping areas, reduce curb cuts by joining parking lots together, so that we don't, take our lives in our hands on a Saturday in July trying to get out of the Dunkin' Donuts. So it's those type of things, but.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
That's helpful. I know as someone who used to ride bicycles daily, I don't get on 302.
We're not getting the audio.
I'm sorry, you do need to be at the
I'm
podium.
sorry.
That's okay.
I just want to say thank you
Sure.
for the clarification.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Those are the sorts of things that are being talked about in Wyndham right now is, do we put in medians so that people are only taking right-hand turns into businesses as opposed to trying to take those really dangerous left-hand turns? And if that's the case, great. Well, that's going to tick off some of my businesses because the only way to get into it from Raymond is going to be to go around. So are we going to have an opportunity for there to be a place for people to safely do U-turns? And there's lots of access roads that are going to be coming in either off 115 to 302, like out behind Home Depot in Wyndham, and over by Walmart, there's already an access road, but having that go all the way into White's Bridge Road. So again, trying to take people off of 302 and finding ways for them to get to where they need to go without having to be on 302. Now, that's great for Wyndham, but what would that look like in Raymond? So, you know what I mean? Again, it's asking the questions. I mean, the DOT has had to do a lot of studying to figure out how things might work in Wyndham. So, maybe that's a conversation that we have to, okay, great, this is going to work for Wyndham, we hope. So what does that look like as we continue down, into Raymond, Casco, and Naples? And, nobody has the answers to those questions right now, but if we start to talk about it, can we come up with those solutions?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly ties into what I have.
I'm so sorry. Really, that way the audience can see you and hear you.
Sorry, it ties into the question of do we want more building on 302 if it's already very congested?
One of the things that we're looking at is like our business district on 302. Does it make sense to utilize that area, or does it make sense to utilize a different area for our businesses? So that's the thing. We were talking about that a little bit last week, and then also there is a discussion about bypass in Raymond, right? It talks at least. I don't know how far it's gotten, but the town's been looking to identify those areas because that would be it. I think a bypass off of 302 would be super beneficial to this town.
Hi, Chase Curtis, 22 Merrill. Thank you, Robin, for being here. Related to the prior question and to the members of this committee, is there some place that MDOT posts or publishes initiatives, even if they're very conceptual, on 302, what they're thinking about? You mentioned the White's Bridge cutoff as being one, medians, turning lanes. There must be some prioritization list that MDOT is looking at, even if it's only conceptual. Where can we, as citizens interested in what's going on, and maybe be able to weigh in either through the comprehensive plan or advocating with your organization, say, hey, that's a great idea, or no, we're really concerned about that? Is there a place for that? Thank you.
I believe that information can be found on the Town of Wyndham's website, but do not quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that information is available. I will find out for sure, and I will get that information to you so that you know, because you live in Raymond, but I imagine you guys probably head to Wyndham quite often, and so this is going to affect you folks as much as it's going to affect anyone. So I'm more than happy to find out. I think it is on the Wyndham, but I'll find out for sure.
Thank you. But that's Wyndham, but 302 continues through our community and then through Naples. Is there a more, call it, regional plan for 302, and what should we?
I don't know that there is, and I think that goes back to what Peter was saying, is is there a way that we can engage the MDOT to find out, are there plans? Are they talking about things? I don't have an answer to that question, but I know who I could ask and who would have the answer to that question. And again, I'm more than happy as part of this process to help in any way. And if that's a good place for me to start, I'm more than happy to.
Mr. Curtis, I just went on to the main DOT website, and they have a list of current projects. Maybe worth checking out, but
Great.
I think you would have to probably investigate a little bit further, and if it's a question that we can answer, we'll try to bring it back to our next meeting.
Clearly, it's something that the CompPlan committee itself, as well as interested citizens, need to really focus on, because it comes up on every conversation that I've heard in this committee. So it is a crucial artery for our community.
Sure. What I do know is that Maine DOT, they collect tons of data. So, and we've seen some of it. There's data that we have collected just on this committee about accidents, where's the highest risk accident zone in Raymond. We got a map from DOT, so they collect that data. As far as traffic congestion, I believe if you go on the site, you'll find out where they currently are doing traffic studies. But a lot of that is really based on community action and lobbying on a community level to say, I nearly got run over the other day. What are you doing about it? And one voice isn't a lot, two is okay, but it's I like the idea of getting together with area municipalities and seeing what we could do collectively to have one voice, because I believe that's really what it's going to take to get some sort of action.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public that would like to make a comment tonight? Okay, I'm seeing none, so I'm going to close public comment for now. On to old business, and that would be you, Kate, with more stuff.
Right. So we have, so I hope everyone on the committee got a copy of the draft goals document and the draft future land use plan. So what we were hoping to do tonight is to sort of walk through those two documents. I don't think we have time to kind of get in depth into every single action item in this meeting, but to sort of walk through, see what the feedback is, see if we're kind of on the right track, and then we'll continue to refine it from there. And just to sort of remind everyone of where we are in this process, the conversation we had at the last meeting is that, you know, we'll spend this meeting going over these two parts of the plan again, and then because of the 4th of July holiday, we talked about skipping the July meeting. We'd have to reschedule it anyway, I think. And instead, in July, we will have a first draft of the comprehensive plan for you to read and spend your meeting time instead kind of reading, digesting, commenting on, and then we'll come back in August to discuss it. So does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Can we look at invest in safe and accessible transportation for all, since that seems to be
We definitely will. So I just to and excuse me, I have a bit of a sore throat. So just to give an introduction for the members of the public who are here, there are a number of parts of a comprehensive plan that are basically required by the state, and one of them is to have goals, policies, and strategies. Now, part of the plan is that the state gives you a big spreadsheet of goals, policies, and strategies from the state that you have to include in the plan. But the town is also able to create your own local goals. So these are things that are not really covered by the state goals, but are more specific and often higher priority to the town. So that's what we're gonna go through first. I am gonna share my screen so we can look at the document. Let's see, there we go. So we can go out of order if people want and start with transportation. Does anyone have a strong feeling? Or we can just kind of go through and just keep an eye on the time.
I think we're flexible. Go ahead.
I think starting with transportation, these folks are here on transportation concerns, and let's
Yeah.
engage them, keep them engaged, and once we get on to the other topics, they may not have as much need or interest to stick around, but you're welcome to, certainly.
Yeah, totally. So Sam, who is online, will kind of walk us through here. So the goal we came up with, which we discussed last week, is invest in safe and accessible transportation for all. And then I'll have Sam walk us through the sort of policies, which are kind of the next level down, and then we can talk about some of the specific action items we have on here.
So we have 4 main policies under invest in safe and accessible transportation. So the first being make it easier to walk and bike around Raymond. So the policies, as Kate said, are like the next level down from the goals. And then under each goal, there are the action strategies, which are more specific, and usually they assign some sort of a task to somebody and have more of a time frame. Then the second one is improve road safety. So a lot of this has to do with more speeding and traffic on 302, and some complete streets as well. And then the bypass or connector to reduce traffic. And the third is to increase off-road trails for recreation and bike ped access through town. So this is more of a partially like transportation, but also partially recreation. So just improving connectivity, how people get places, and making it easier to walk, especially to access like lakes and ponds and open spaces. And then the last one we had here is alternatives to driving. So as you know, Raymond doesn't have public transportation, and so most people drive to meet their basic needs. So exploring different options for that, whether it be rideshare, van pool for seniors, or bringing back the Lakes Region bus, which we recommend here. So as this seems like a very robust topic, I think probably for now, we want to just start with kind of overall impressions of the goals. Do they make sense to people? Could they be like worded differently? Is there anything that we're missing? And just start with with that, and then we can get a little bit more specific.
Yeah, so we open it up to you now.
Yes.
I was glad to see that the Raymond Cape Road made it on this list because we haven't talked about it in a few meetings, but it was certainly something we talked about a little while ago. So I think it's important to keep that on there. I think there's a desire among that neighborhood to have a safer road for non-vehicular travelers.
I think overall, a lot of this comes down to is that we prioritize vehicular traffic patterns and not pedestrian traffic patterns. And so this has been happening for a long time, and that's why no one feels safe to walk or ride a bike in town. And, you know, I know the goal is invest in safe and accessible transportation for all, but maybe we should change that goal, and it should be to prioritize pedestrian and self-motorized forms of transportation in town. Or it should be a separate goal. You know, I do think, you know, if I didn't have to drive to the store, I wouldn't. I would ride a bike, but I'm not going to ride a bike in this town on these roads. You know, and it's not a quick walk, you know, from where I live. So
A lot of hills.
a lot of, hey, you know, it's good cardio, but, you know, but if, you know, e-bikes are very popular nowadays with younger people, and I would say they're much cheaper than electric vehicles, and you can go pretty significant distances, at least within town. If there was a bike trail to the Hannafords and Gray, like you could probably get there on an e-bike relatively fast, you know, with a cart in tow. I think there would probably be more of that if it was acceptable. I do think this is like a Field of Dreams scenario. If you build it, they will come. You know, this is a very outdoorsy part of Maine, and you know, I think we've made it inaccessible for a lot of people.
I guess I would say that I would definitely support the idea of the town contracting for additional sheriffs on the roads. I know other communities have done it, which is basically when they want to resolve a traffic issue when it involves speed or other traffic violations on the road that make it unsafe. That, as we've talked before at this committee, you can maybe get DOT or maybe even the municipality to reduce speed limits on roads. My experience is that really has little effect on the speed on the roads. What affects speed on the roads and behavior on the roads is to see a prowler, or, and they say in Canada, or a police car. And I know that some communities basically have, you know, the argument is always going to be, you know, my house got broken into, and there's a cop down the road, but he's not coming to investigate someone breaking into my house. Because he's on traffic. I would say you absolutely dedicate a police officer under contract for traffic, and that they not be at one or two locations in the town. Because where I've seen the sheriff's presence in the one or two locations in town, guess what? There's no speeding. But what it has to be is that every day that a police officer is somewhere else, visible. And after a while, similar to like Yarmouth and coming in there, when they say 25 miles an hour, they mean 25 miles an hour, and I can testify to that. So that's what I'd say is something that really needs to be contained in that. I like John's idea of basically maybe breaking this up more defined in a traffic flow, and improving traffic flow on 302 is a whole separate category, because, I mean, similar to what we just talked about, some sort of collaboration with everybody that's affected by 302, getting together in some sort of a committee and working on just that issue.
Yeah, the work with Maine DOT to lower the speed limit on Route 85 in East Raymond Village, like that's kind of going back to what you're talking about, is we could lower that speed limit. Doesn't mean it's going to do anything. And traffic still needs to flow nicely, so we can't just put a halt to all moving traffic, but having a police presence would definitely help. And I know we've talked about that not only in this committee, but on our Budget Finance Committee as well. So it's being talked about to hire somebody as opposed to just lowering the speed limit.
I think maybe another thing would be, I mean, lowering the speed limit would definitely help with the safety. I think from the traffic perspective, there needs to be some sort of change in traffic flows. And, you know, I think obviously we don't have full control over 302 and we don't have full control over 85, but we do have control over all the surrounding roads. You know, if there are ways to impact some of those intersections, I know the Good Life intersection's probably not big enough for a traffic circle because you probably need to get certain size trucks going on 302, and so the main dot's not going to allow that. But you know, those would be ideas, so you don't continually have people stuck at traffic at some of these kind of critical intersections.
I think a traffic study in the town would go a long way to helping, at the very least, address the traffic lights that we do have. I sometimes think that they stayed Monday through Friday and they cut out of work at 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon and just missed all our traffic Friday afternoon on, which is the majority of our problems here. So I think a traffic study at those lights could go a long way. And, you know, it may not be big, that area may not be big enough for a roundabout, or it may be for a traffic circle, but maybe a smaller roundabout that you'd see in the Little Falls over in Gorham. I know there are going to be additional restrictions that just because of the water that's so close to that, but, you know, these are things that we're going to have to balance any way you look at it. So the other thing, Kate and Sam, that I think we'd spoken about at the last meeting is, and you'll have the phrase for it that I can't recall, but it's where you drive someplace and you park. And it's the one park or some
Park and ride?
Yeah.
Park and ride.
yeah, and so I didn't see that on improving the road safety, but I think we talked about that as a way to get people off the road. And if we're improving pedestrian access as well, I think it hits a couple of those categories too.
Yeah, we can add, I'm counting on Sam to be taking notes right now, but we can add something like that in there. I think the other thing I want to mention as we're having this conversation, and these parts of the plan are going to kind of evolve as we continue to work over the next few months, but one of the optional things you can do is identify priority actions. So a list of, you know, maybe 5 to 10 things that you think the town needs to do first. It's optional, so if there aren't, but it does seem like there are some things that keep floating to the top. So, you know, especially this idea, we just said create a 302 master plan. I think we could make that even more specific now, maybe talk about collaborating with other towns. That's usually the first step to making changes on these DOT state roads, is to do a planning project with DOT. Happily, DOT provides funding for that. But, you know, they want you to sort of start by having like community meetings and bringing in engineers and stuff to identify different possibilities. So that's usually the first step before you can go forward and say, we want a roundabout here and we want a traffic light here.
Engage with DOT.
So I think that might definitely be a priority action from what I'm hearing from everyone.
But establishing a contact with DOT and a relationship to get that information flow moving, and rather than just jumping in with Casco and our neighbors and coming up with a wonderful plan we think is great. Seems like getting DOT in here, or in a conversation, in a relationship with DOT, knowing that a master plan or significant improvements would be years out. Starting that soon would be a priority.
Yeah, so we can make that a priority action. And I did just want to point out, we did include a section at the end of this document of basically funding opportunities. These are things that currently exist this year. Some of these change all the time. Some of them are more steady. But when we prepare the sort of final plan document, we'll make sure that I'm envisioning a kind of spreadsheet where we connect some of these things. So, you know, these MDOT municipal partnership and planning partnership programs would probably be a good fit for doing that kind of 302 planning work.
Was I also hearing that we sort of wanted to separate 302 and make it its own? Like, so I just want to make sure we caught note of that. But you do have an idea of, like, you don't want to have too many of these little bullet points, right? Is that kind of like, you know, a goal? Maybe we could combine, make it easier to walk and bike around Raymond with the increase of off-road trails and recreation in a way, kind of combine that into one, and then make a 302 sort of its own thing and pull out the 302 nuggets and put it in under that. I don't know, just to keep the...
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think we can do that. You know, you can have as many or as few as you want. I think for, you know, to make it easier for a future implementation committee to feel like they can, that they're not totally overwhelmed, it's good to keep it as concise as you can.
Comment about work with RTP to bring back the Lakes Region bus. Being on my other committee, Budget Finance, I got the sense that another committee wasn't interested in that. So I would say that if the general public has interest in bringing back the RTP, I would say that make your voices heard, because the discussion was brought up and it was quickly killed. If enough people are talking about it, then and demanding it, then maybe that might change. And if there's no demand, then there's no demand. But I get the sense that at least a couple people I talked to were interested in it.
That goes back to the idea of getting people out of their cars. That's the solution to most of these problems.
Yes.
It's a far out solution because you're going to have to change the way people think about how they get from one place to another. But that is what the solution is going to be. It isn't going to be making wider roads or changing the speed limits or any of that. As we keep going, the amount of traffic is going to continue to increase. As you well know, Maine is more than just a vacation land now. With what's happening in this country and around the world and climate change, we're in a pretty good place. And people will begin to notice this.
Already have.
If you look at the sales of homes in a lot of places in Maine, it isn't locals buying them. That's for sure. So traffic is going to continue to increase no matter what we do until we find a solution for getting people out of their cars and getting them to where they want to go in a different mode of transportation.
Yeah, Sean, would it make more sense to word that in a way like have a public meeting to see if people want to bring back the Lakes Region bus, something like that? Do we feel like we need more public input before we make it a goal?
I think we need to have more public input, and it needs to be heard. Because like Frank's saying, maybe the mindset's not there. I mean, for me personally, I wouldn't take the bus to Portland. I'm definitely that guy's going to take my car and go. However, that's not, I don't represent the entire community. We have various ages. So I would say that if we could have something to have some kind, not a poll, but just generate some kind of, see if there's interest. Does anybody out in the public out here, or would they?
Sean, I just have something to add to that, and then Peter, I know that you wanted to say something. I think maybe we could just say that we would like to speak with RTP about ridership functionality. What can we do to increase people who are interested? Because I mean, I think it had limited times that it stopped in Raymond. I never wrote it, but I know, John, that you did a few times. I don't know, like, I think for the average person, it wasn't as convenient. And I think that that's a hurdle you have to overcome. So I think this encompasses a very large discussion that would take many partners, us polling the community to see what their needs and interests are. If we offer RTP funding again, can they meet some of those needs so that they have actual riders? I think it's a large question.
That's exactly what it is. Like, we are not funding them because it's not seen that it's needed. So if it's not needed, it's not needed. but I just wanted to bring that up because I do think that there are some people whose voices need to be heard. And if we don't need it, if the general public doesn't care for it, then that's fine.
Peter, I know you've been
Well, it was a
waiting.
user
Sorry.
issue, wasn't it? It wasn't used much.
You know more about it.
I don't think it
Sure.
was.
So my experience with this issue, I'll be very blunt. We could have all kinds of surveys and ask all kinds of people. I talked to the executive director of RTP. I think actually that's a regional, but he was the executive director for the whole southern Maine system. I called him up specifically when I saw the 2 lines on the website that said that the town was no longer going to be served by RTP. My issue is this one. It doesn't really have to be the ridership as the major issue. When you look at the financials, RTP has been subordinated from Bridgeton to Portland with an annual contribution by each of those communities of $10,000. Every one of those communities forever has been ponying up the $10,000. And for whatever reason, town leadership decided that there wasn't enough ridership for us to justify it. And also they didn't like the fact that you pay the same amount if you get on in Bridgeton as if you get on in Wyndham. To me, that is also a moot issue. We're talking about $10,000. And every other community on that line is paying up and has been paying that $10,000 so that they can say, we have some form of public transportation. So I kind of, compare this to recycling. We can go back and forth on whether we make money or lose money on recycling, but it's hard to argue that it's not a good idea to recycle, and it's not a bad idea to have public transportation. So to be honest with you, I think that this whole issue could, and I asked the executive director, what would it take to get the RTP reestablished in Raymond? And he said, if you pay your fair share like every other community, I can turn it on in 2 days. So to me, it doesn't look like it's that much of an issue. But once again, that's just my opinion.
I got the same sense too. It was that we were paying the same amount that Bridgeton was.
As far as the ticket, the price of a ticket. And as far as if you wanted to have more discussion with RTP, up until a few years ago, when we had the service, at Budget Finance, as you're aware, what happens is the providers, the outside providers, come and make their case to Budget Finance and Selectmen and say, this is what we're asking for, whether it's for the Lake Association or some other private type of a provider. So to me, if we wanted to hear from the regional transportation program, all we need to do is say, we've got the $10,000 for you on the multi-million-dollar budget that we have. And I don't care if it's 100 rides a year. If there were 100 people, citizens of the town of Raymond, that could benefit from having a way to get in and out of Portland, whether it's a doctor's appointment or to see their grandchild, then that should be available.
It's a great service. Wrote it for 6-7 years from the start, 8 years, and 6, 8, 4, 3, 0. Raymond folks on an average ride through that time period. Again, not a huge number, but it's a key piece. I think about this the same way we think about non-point source pollution. It's an important piece to all this work we're doing on the comp plan. The bus, the 302 planning, working with DOT, the rural space plan. I mean, it's all a piece. As soon as we start taking pieces out of it, our efforts fall short of where we were hoping to get to. And so I'd hope the bus could come back on the table in some form, and that it should be part of it, part of our congestion relief program. I mean, it bings off a couple of key things. Transportation for folks who don't have a license or whatever. There's plenty of items that it provides other than than just transportation for a regular commuter. So,
Can we maybe take from the committee, do people want to leave this as is, or do people want to change the wording to, maybe like, do some public engagement to assess if we want to bring it back?
I think the public engagement needs to be there, because if there's only 5 people in all Raymond, then maybe it's, but if there's 100 people who are interested in it, we make a much better case for the $10,000 that's owed to them. So I think that a little bit more polling of that, and polling might show that nobody cares about it, and that will tell us right there that maybe it's not the right tree to bark up.
right.
On the other side of the coin, maybe what we need to do is show the attractiveness of using the bus. Show people ways that the bus could save them time and money. Give them an idea how it might benefit them, rather than just saying we aren't going to have it because there aren't enough people riding it.
Well, I wonder too, how much maybe business are we limiting in Raymond by not having the bus stop in Raymond? Would people be coming from Bridgeton or Casco and want to be coming to Raymond as a stop? But, I don't know what we have that others don't, but,
I think we just need to decide, I think at this point, like, do we want
think
to
it's
keep this
fine to leave
language
it
in
as
here? I kind of think it's actually just fine to leave it.
Okay.
In my opinion, I don't know if we agree with that as a whole as a committee.
Can I get a show of hands?
Can I do one comment first? Just from the point of view of anybody who would be on a future implementation committee, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe some of these are more discrete in the way that they are isolated things. When it's worded like this one is, work with RTP to bring back the Lakes Region bus. We could be working with them for 10 years to try to bring this back. If we were to say, put a time frame on it, or, run a process, right? Like processes have beginnings and ends. I think that would be my own comment, which isn't specific to this one, but this is a good example. And there are a lot that are worded like this. And I just think if the implementation committee has 50 to 100 things they're trying to implement, and all of them have these very vague, long time horizons, and you're working with people, or you're, communicating with the public, like it never ends. And for some things, they shouldn't end, like it should be constant. But like this is one where it should come to a head sooner or later.
Yeah. How about work with RTP and work with the town of Raymond and RTP to explore bringing back the Lake Region bus?
I still think there should be some kind of polling of our citizens, though, because if we're, just to see what they're, just to gauge the citizens to see if they want to bring it back.
That's what the polling would be part of that, working with the town of Raymond
Okay.
to explore whether it's worth it, put a poll out next.
Engage citizens and town of Raymond to see if we can bring back public transportation.
Sure.
Yeah.
And not to be redundant, but I believe we already have some of that data.
Right.
That was a question.
Yeah.
And I believe we do have the numbers as far as that goes. But
That'd be a good straw poll at the election for your.
Oh.
But John, to answer your comment, we will be putting time frames on these action items. We usually keep it short, medium, long term, and ongoing. But basically, that's kind of the next step. First, we want to kind of get more agreement that we're on the right track with what the strategies are. So. Do we want to, I'm just conscious of time, so do we want to keep on transportation for now, or do we want to pivot to another area?
Satisfied.
I think we should pivot so we can continue on.
So do we want to start at the beginning then, maybe just try and go through the rest? So Sam, do you want to go through this one?
Yeah, sure. So build a resilient Raymond. So we have 3 goals under this one. The first being prepare for the impacts of climate change. The second, construct weather-resistant infrastructure. And the third, to increase town capacity to serve the community. So a lot of these deal with infrastructure improvements and road improvements to decrease flooding, upgrading town culverts. continuing to work with Axiom to pursue that broadband study that's been done with several communities in the Lakes region. So some of these actions have specific people and assignments, and others are more general that we're looking to refine. So sort of starting with the same thing, if anybody has any general thoughts to start, we can open it up.
And I think the idea of resilient here is in the sense of sort of build a stronger Raymond, kind of the idea of like future proof, like how can we be a stronger community into the future? And that's why it sort of spans both, sort of hard things like culverts and infrastructure, as well as town capacity.
So I'm very familiar with the broadband. We're going to be voting on that this month, but I'm not familiar with Axiom.
We might have taken that from an old report. Did we do that, Peter?
Axiom.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's found that in a report, but if it's wrong, we can make that correction.
Yeah, so keep us updated on how that vote goes too, because we may need to adjust the goal depending on where you are in the process.
Yeah, I guess I would say as far as resiliency, and we've got what I think is a crackerjack maintenance department here, taking care of the roads and the like. They do look at culverts, but generally speaking, like anything else, that's limited as far as the dollars that are available. I would think that given where the climate is going, drainage off of the roads, which then ties into the road safety and shoulders wearing out and the like, all ties together. And I would say also, I've taken this course and I spoke with the chief of the fire department about it, but as far as NFPA programs aimed at decreasing potential for wildfires, the second most forested state in the union, that the issue, I think, is no clearer than seeing what happened a week or so ago when 3 structures burned down. And I believe what I heard in the reports from the numerous fire departments that responded, that there were 2 issues: getting water to the site and the amount of brush and acorns on the ground around the camps that just spread the fire very quickly and took them a long time to control. So that NFPA course, which basically could be promoted through some sort of educational endeavor by the town, to let people know that when you have a windstorm like we had a month ago, or the snowstorm we had a month ago, that all of those branches that are surrounding our yards and our house need to be taken care of to reduce the chance of wildfires. And I believe with the climate having to do with resiliency, that is also going to be something on the increase.
Yeah, the regulations of shoreline zone aren't very helpful to that.
No, you're right.
I've done a lot of work in the shoreline zone.
Absolutely, you're right.
People are just too handcuffed.
Can't remove that duff, can you?
Good luck describing a hazard tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are all good bullets, and I think the town capacity piece of add staff capacity to seek and manage grant funding through additional staff is a critical thing for our little town. There's so many grant opportunities out there, state, federal, environmental, traffic, community resiliency, recreation, and we've had success winning a number of those in the past, and but we're correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, but wouldn't it be great to have someone dedicated to identifying and pursuing ones that look viable and in line with our mission? That could be would probably be a part-time person. Don't envision it to be a full-time person, but a 20-hour person or something.
Yeah, my understanding right now is that any grants that we get, basically, it's either a type of a private endeavor that gets some support from the town, or it's the town department heads themselves that write it. And quite honestly, I just don't know how they have the time to do that and also do their regular jobs. So I would echo John in the fact that some type of a contract service, grant writers, and you just they're guns for hire. They go out, they know they've got the network, and you tell them what you want, and they look for it.
Do any of these seem like we should be pushing them as a priority?
Not a priority, but I absolutely love our piece about increasing town capacity to serve the community. I absolutely love the encourage community members of all ages to participate on boards and committees. I really appreciate that being there.
I love the town volunteer network. I think
that's one of your ideas.
Oh, well, there we go.
Thanks.
Well, I was going to give you credit, but thanks. Yeah, I think it's...
No, I think that's a great idea.
I think it's just a place that we can have the discussion, ongoing discussions to help support ourselves, and it will also build the community. One thing that jumps out at me that we may not have mentioned when we're talking about building a resilient Raymond and preserving resources, I know those are two separate categories, but identifying and educating landowners about invasive species of plants and insects, because we've got a fair amount of those. I don't think that's a huge action item, but something that is going to impact us and continues to impact us, identifying what's here and how we can minimize spread. And
yeah, we can add that.
Touched a little bit in natural and water resources.
Oh, I think I wasn't sure if that was just for
combat
water.
Invasive species.
Yeah,
but
You did
maybe
for
we
water,
could
but
elaborate.
we can add. We can add. I thought we had some other.
Relative to the forest, Greg, you seeing much invasives in the forest that are?
I see plenty. Are you asking me a question?
You answered our question. Yeah, right. Perfect.
Which species do you want to know about? There's plenty of them.
I do have a quick question for Sue, our town manager. It says a community e-newsletter. I'm just curious if the Roadrunner is still sent out electronically. I know that at one time it was sent out to like a common listserv in a way, and I was wondering if that still occurs.
I'm not sure.
I might not be saying that correctly, but
I think you are, and I don't
Okay.
recall seeing it go out because I was on that list and I haven't seen, and for a seed thing, so I would know when it went out.
Okay.
And I haven't seen it, so I'll ask Melissa because that might have been something that kind of just fell off the shelf.
Maybe
with change of staff.
Change of staff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just was curious because I didn't know if we were already doing that, but that's a concern. That means we're definitely not doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Like if nobody knows that it's actually happening, then we need to really improve upon that.
Yeah. Yeah, but the Roadrunner is still happening. It's going in once a
Right,
month.
but I just didn't know if it
Everyone
was
gets
still
so.
being.
But I don't believe it's
then
being
sent
pushed out electronically
Okay.
anymore.
Okay.
So I'll check on that tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Are we ready to move on? Okay.
Yeah, so natural resources. This is definitely something that was obviously going to be a goal here. So I will say there are a lot of state required goals regarding natural resources that we didn't duplicate here. So the state does have some goals about promoting tax opportunities for woodlot owners and some educational things for landowners about easements and things like that. So those will be in there as sort of state goals. So I think so the top one is conserve most important natural resources. Then we have a bullet about water quality. And then the last one is increasing public access to Raymond's water bodies. So I'm curious if any of you have comments about any of these.
Increase public access to water bodies, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that one of the priorities I would say would be, as far as water access, would be looking at Panther Run and the Mill Street Dam. I know that they just started reconstruction on the dam, inland fisheries and wildlife. Would have been wonderful had we been able to coordinate that when they were down there rebuilding the dam. But once again, that might be something that in the future, when they're doing maintenance or other changes to the dam, we could also partner with inland fisheries and say, well, how about giving us some sort of a better public access? In the meantime, certainly I would support that as a high priority. As far as, I don't know how much more easily doable as far as easements are concerned, and talking to property owners about, we'd like to put this boat ramp, and besides, it's the state that really is going to decide if they will put a boat ramp there. And so that becomes more of a complex issue. But certainly, looking at the access at Panther Run would be something I would say would be a high priority. That's something that's doable.
Sure, somebody's already asked this, and I've clearly forgotten it, but the state is the one who maintains that boat launch? That's my question, I guess. Is that correct?
Yes. Unless, Greg, probably you know better, but I think it's Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally don't have much to add on this. I think it covers it.
I would echo Peter, and I would just comment on kind of the first bullet, that kind of general public access, maybe on those three bodies of water. I mean, I do live on Raymond Pond, but that pond cannot support more than 1 or 2 motorboats at a time, unless you're in a pontoon boat. And I haven't been to Notch Pond or Double Pond, and then I looked them up on the map before this meeting, and I would think it would make sense to have, if this was to remain here, have some sort of restriction on the type of vehicle that was going into those bodies of water.
Non-motorized.
Yeah, we can make that more specific. I think we were not envisioning a boat launch there. We were envisioning just a public access easement that people can go to the shore, go swimming, or go fishing or something.
But I do echo Peter's sentiment that trying to buy an easement from a current landowner, I don't know if that should be a goal from the implementation committee for this, but just from a pure resource standpoint, although we do talk about it in, trying to work with other landowners for conservation purposes. So I will leave it at that.
The last point that's on this section too talks about improving the hand carry boat launch at Panther Run, but over on Crescent, there's land I believe that the town owns between Crescent and Panther. What's the name of that river?
Tenny.
Tenny River. That could, I think, be included in this as well to increase public hand carry access or something.
I'd second that. And I've had experience carrying a 16-foot canoe down with a 14-year-old boy and down that dirt slope, and it's a challenge, that's for sure.
And you're talking about right at 85 at the culvert crossing?
Where Plains Road meets.
Yeah, it's kind of a less, it's kind of a busy area to be carrying stuff down, but folks do it, there's no doubt.
Or even if there were parking there for accessing Crescent Lake Beach,
We can make basically a similar bullet to the one about Panther Run for the Tenny River, right? And we'll confirm with you that we got the intersection right.
Tenny.
I guess I wonder whether,
Well, the Boy Scouts on.
yeah, it's Boy Scout land, and but I wonder whether that's the best place at 85 at the bottom of that hill to try to stuff more cars and have more people hauling boats in and out when we have a public ramp right 200 yards down the road that is certainly busy on holiday weekends and
That's a good point,
most
Phil.
weekends, but kind of consolidating our efforts to maybe, in the spirit of public access to waters of the state of Maine.
Sure.
I would think we'd want to kind of have that all happen right at the existing beach, and maybe it's a little improved parking down there, and traffic maybe some traffic management, in terms of slowing things down a bit.
I do approve of the new signs that are up there. If anyone has noticed, there's new like pedestrians or something 25 zone, or it's a big yellow sign now.
Cemetery, there's the Tenny River.
So are you talking about Crescent Lake?
Yeah, specifically.
I see.
Between Crescent.
Yes, so there's a public beach at Crescent Lake, and it's very busy. There's a lot of traffic down there, and there's sort of almost a blind corner too when you're coming from one direction, where all of a sudden you go around a corner and then there's tons of boats backing into the boat launch, and there's people walking around, and you know, children, families, kids crossing the road. It's very hectic down there.
Okay.
And there is people park on the shoulder there, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And I guess also we wouldn't want to establish someplace where any type of boater is going to circumvent the inspections. And end up with invasive.
And that's what would happen at the culvert if we had folks launching, even though those are largely hand carried boats.
So should we have it
Yes, on
say
the
improve?
Improve the safety of the Crescent Lake boat launch area.
Okay.
Safety and parking.
Okay.
14 acres.
Yeah.
Sue, do we own 14 acres on Plains Road on Tenny River? It's a cemetery there?
7. Yeah, is it 14?
Riverside Cemetery.
Yeah.
That would.
Waterfront.
It's got quite a bit of waterfront on Tenny River. I don't know what kind of quality it is, but
Okay, so we've got that. So we'll change that, and we will clarify the public access easements that this is not no motorized boats. This is just public access for passive recreation.
At Raymond, Notched, and Nubble,
Yes, for our smaller ponds.
for the smaller ponds. 'cause,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, Notched and Nubble are largely private land ownership around the whole thing, I think.
And we can change this if it doesn't make sense to you. We are sort of looking at what water bodies in Raymond don't have any public access
Right.
at all.
Right.
So we can kind of put a pin in that and come back to it later too, if people want to think about it. All right, and then, so the last big goal is strengthen Raymond's sense of community. So these are all goals around kind of building community in Raymond. So we have small businesses, village character, supporting residents of all ages, and more generally, community connection.
I know this would be a little redundant, but I think this would also be an appropriate place for the park and ride idea. I think foot traffic in fully pedestrian areas, you know, around town, surrounded by parks, maybe, you know, if the town gets this area back, you know, this building, you know, foot traffic is a major driver of some of these businesses. If you want to eat outside at a coffee shop instead of just drive your car through the drive-through, you know, Saturday morning, maybe integrating some of these potential businesses with sports fields and things, so you don't necessarily have to leave and, you know, go to all these different places within town to, you know, enjoy that. You know, if you had a sports field and, you know, a couple little shops and Mosquito ice cream all in the same spot, I mean, that would be a nice...
It's very specific.
I'm just saying, you know, you got to drive a long way to go, and then it's like,
You want any specific
you know,
flavors?
I'm going to run into the gas station, and then, you know, that's it. So,
We could put something, the Park Once model might fit well under the small business policy.
Park once, yeah.
I think to create more opportunities for community connection, obviously develop a master plan for the reuse of Jordan Small School. And I will tell you later on in the agenda, Kayla's going to be talking a little bit about the survey we're going to do at the June 11th election, where we hope to get a lot of feedback from the public by providing them with 5 choices of what they would like to see in that space. And there will be a 6th choice, which will be other. So it'd be interesting to see what other we would get as well. But I think that that's a metric that is going to be helpful. But definitely, it just makes sense that if you want to start establishing community, what does it mean? It means something in common, right? It's community, and that means a place where people gather, whether it's to be able to have a meeting in a space that's comfortable and can accommodate even overflow crowds, or nobody shows up at all. Or if it's an area where we need to get the business of the town done in not such a cramped and antiquated space. All of those things, but definitely trying to get some more of a sense of community. And I would just put in the mention of volunteerism before. A lot of this stuff, I believe, regardless of what that space is used for, can be staffed by volunteers. I've seen it in other communities. Once they have a space, then it's like, yeah, I can volunteer for that. Chair?
Yes, if you'd like to make a comment.
We need to introduce myself again.
If you would, please.
John
Just in case
Stetson,
people just
16 Merrill. So, Peter, something you talked about before, I think in other meetings, and this is not unrelated to 302. When you go down to support residents of all ages, it says amend ordinances to allow more varied housing types across all residential zoning districts. With how congested 302 is, you've advocated, I believe, in some way, shape, or form, not only with Jordan School, but also having the town own some property up here. I mean, one of the things that I believe you said was inevitable was that there was going to be a need for affordable housing. So does it make, is that something that's being discussed, is where that would be located?
Well, yeah, you sound like a very informed individual, and I can tell you that it's actually the state mandates affordable housing for communities. Right. The communities have chosen either to do it or not.
Is that part of the vision you have with Jordan School and having this area up here be walkable and there's
I believe
fewer issues with traffic?
When we discuss a future land use plan, which is next on the agenda, we're going to actually be talking about East Raymond as...
I look forward to hearing what you say.
Sure.
Kate, I actually had a question about that bullet.
Yeah.
It's under support residents of all ages. And then it is a fairly broad general statement, which if it's just placed there, it could be taken out of context, because I know that we're targeting so many other different parts of the plan in relation to this specific bullet. So maybe to make it more specific in conjunction with, and then refer to that part of the plan, just to make sure we're not creating something that has a life in and of its own in this particular bullet.
Yeah, we can think more about how to word this. I think that the target here is that most of Raymond is you can only build a single family home. So the idea here is not that we need to radically change the way things happen in Raymond, but it's that, maybe it's okay to build a duplex in the same place you can build a single family home, or even 3 units in something that looks like a single family home. And that would allow both for seniors to stay in place and for younger people to move to Raymond. So, but yeah, we can refine that. Should we move on for now, and we'll revisit this in our next meeting?
Can I just say that North Star has done a great job in capturing basically what this committee has been gathering information, and for the public here, just to be aware that these goals and strategies and the like, while this is a very, very good committee with a lot of great ideas, a lot of what these goals came out of was basically our mission statement or our vision statement, and that was informed by surveying the community on what your priorities were.
All right, yes, moving on.
Okay, should we talk about future land use? Now, again, this is just sort of the first in a series of discussions we're going to have about this. We're going to continue to refine this over the next few months. I will start by bringing up our draft future land use map. So Raymond is long and skinny, so we're gonna have to zoom around in order to see it. But what we've drafted here, and I'm gonna kind of give you a few questions about it, is we have a 302 growth area that avoids touching the shoreline but spans kind of the existing commercial district where there's infrastructure. We also have 302 growth in the area over here that has commercial and industrial businesses. The orange, and I can make this bigger too. The orange is Raymond Village, and what we did here was we actually brought Raymond Village out to the boundary of town. The idea being that this is the area where some folks in town have talked about a bypass or some other new residential development over there. And if that were to occur in the future, we would want it to follow a kind of village style of development. So that's the reason for making that bigger. Then we have, this is East Raymond Village. We tried to sort of follow parcel lines away from the water. The idea is that we're centering this on the existing town-owned properties as well as the historic store and church that kind of used to anchor East Raymond Village. And then what's in yellow here is that those parcels that I think they're zoned industrial, they're telecommunications. And then the rest of town is rural. I do want to sort of reiterate, since we have members of the public here, the state calls it a growth area. Growth does not mean development, apartment buildings, big box stores. That's not what growth means. Growth means a place for investment. So if we want to see change on 302, if we want to see investment in traffic and sidewalks and things like that, then it might make sense to make it a growth area. The term doesn't always match exactly what we're trying to describe. So I think for the committee to, what we can, another thing to think about is these sort of areas around, this is sort of where Sabre Yachts and some of those other businesses are, and then these telecommunications or electronic diode.
The TV towers there, the pump station, the pipeline station. There.
And radio detection, or I think that's what they're called, radio, something like that. Anyway, these are areas of existing commercial and industrial development. One thing to think about is, do we want those to be growth areas, like a focus of investment, or should we call them transition areas, which is a little lighter of a touch? It's saying, we want these to kind of continue as commercial, but we're not going to invest in them. And I think just talking about these general boundaries, especially the idea of bringing the village out, is something I wanted to talk about tonight. And we can either just jump off from there. I can, give a few points from the written narrative that go into more of the details. You let me know.
Kate, as far as the growth areas in the 2004, and just to clarify, this is not a zoning map. So in matter of fact, the state requires it not be a zoning map.
This is not regulatory.
Yes. So, however, it is tied to a number of issues in building in the state that I won't get into, other than to say that when you're talking about how all of these things are interrelated, we're talking about road safety, we're talking about avoiding some of the congestion on 302, especially during the summer months. Where we sit right now is East Raymond Village, according to this map. So that would be considered a growth area by the state, and that we're required to put in the comprehensive plan. That being said, it's not historically without precedent. there was a village here. And it's not here anymore. But what has happened is the schools have developed around here. The town office is here. There's a fire department here. It's on what would be considered a fairly major artery. So were there, let's say, a way to be able to pick up a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk, if there was a way to be able to get a couple of gallons of gas, if there was a way, it would be centered in a growth area, which would be a village area. The other two areas that are designated as village, I believe, were identified in the 2004 plan. And that's why when we look at the 302 corridor and whatever, in 2004, the comprehensive plan of the town of Raymond, the citizens said, those are the areas where we should have development. And so water lines and commercial buildings and all that sort of stuff went there because it seemed like that would be where the growth area would be, along the largest artery, 302. It doesn't make sense not to think of those areas as continuing to be growth areas. We've already invested in them. We've already developed them. But just the point being, if you want to, in some respect, reduce some of the heartburn of the residents of this town as far as 302 congestion, what better thing than to have one or two other newly designated village areas? And certainly with the school coming in 2027, I believe, back to the town, what better opportunity to then designate this as an additional growth area for the town.
It would help ease traffic in the sense that a lot of the people who live in this area wouldn't have to go all the way over there for those things.
Yeah.
They would have it right here. So that would do a lot to ease, at least or a lot of people who live here, they're like traffic woes.
I agree with Kayla, and I think as John has mentioned, I think some other people in this committee, it's you reduce the traffic congestion one car at a time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I believe that's how we're going to have to proceed. I don't know that there's any other way for a quick fix other than to take all of these things and put them together, because they're all interrelated.
I'm also a fan of the East Raymond Village. I'd point out, we're still going to have the elementary school. I mean, it would make sense to have a lot of housing for young families next to the elementary school. There's not much there right now.
And I guess I just would say, because I can't resist it, as of July 1st this year, LD 2003 goes into effect. And so when the gentleman was asking about different houses and the like, I would urge you to read that law and see how it changes density for every municipality in the state of Maine. And so if I've got the appropriate situation as far as land on my property, which is approved for one house, I can build an accessory dwelling unit as of July 1st. That's 1,250 square feet. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot. But if it's 1,250 square feet and it allows me and my wife to move into that and take my 2,000 square foot house and let a family of four move in there and enjoy it, then I've got a place to go when I retire. So what I believe we're going to see through the enactment of that bill, sans the legal ramifications that it'll go through, because it really kind of goes against what's embedded in the Maine Constitution, which is home rule, because the state is telling us as of January 1st, we can do that. And I guess I would put it another way. We can't stop that from happening.
In this draft, I do appreciate the paragraph regarding Route 302 and that the investment would be to improve the corridor. So I appreciate that being in there.
Yeah, I think, we really, in Raymond, we really talked about, in these designated growth areas, we talked about investment and enhancement. So, I think with the turnover of the middle school, this is a good place. This might make sense to be a growth area, so you can direct investment here. Same with Raymond Village, same with 302, it's in order to fix it, we need to direct investment there. So that's sort of the thinking behind these. I think I'm curious about some of, if we want to, about some of those other sort of on the west side, if those should be growth areas or transition, from your opinion.
On the west side, are there any lots that are labeled as rural that are currently zoned for commercial or industrial, or did we basically color in all the existing commercial and industrial to create those zones?
I think I encompassed the commercial and industrial and then sort of the neighbors. Like I said, this is not a zoning map. This is intended to guide future discussions in the town.
There has been a hot issue about commercial development on the 302 corridor. And so what I would tell you is that in the 2004 plan, it basically said that there will be no commercial development specifically on Route 302 in the residential zones, or what's zoned for residential. Once again, as Kate has more than reinforced with me and everyone else here, a comprehensive plan has no statutory standing. We make recommendations. The town is the one that decides how things get zoned. The planning board makes recommendations. They make that recommendation to the select board. Select board puts it on a warrant, and then as citizens, we vote it up or down. So, but just to be aware, that's one issue where it might behoove us to be looking at these growth areas, and with the understanding that if it happens to be that there's some residential lots along the 302 commercial corridor, that there should be some clarification through the planning board to the people as to whether there should be more restrictions on abutting commercial development. But that's not for us to decide. That's for the town to decide.
And I completely understand this is not a zoning map, but when and if any of these were not currently zoned for industrial or commercial space and someone were to go through a rezoning process, they would use this map as precedent for part of their argument that the town's already approved a zoning change.
Sure.
Even though this isn't actually the zoning change, it would be a very strong part of their argument.
And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but the planning board has the authority to basically in a zone approve a conditional use.
Yes. Yeah.
And I believe the issue
That was the case with
that happened
solar.
on 302 was because that was approved as a conditional use.
So I think the question on the western end, both of 302 and the radio tower area, is does the town want to encourage more commercial or industrial growth in those areas? We've heard a lot from people about balancing the tax base through more commercial businesses in Raymond, or do we sort of want to let those kind of continue as is? Because then maybe they don't need to be growth areas.
Well, I believe that the areas we're talking about are within our TIF, so there is a revenue opportunity if in fact that was developed, because that money could then be directed towards development in the town. Once again, if I understand it, that TIF would need to be renewed in like 2030. Yeah.
I think as good economic development policy anyway, you would want to encourage some of that, but as far as public feedback, we've heard a lot of focus on small business.
Well, there was a lot of pushback recently on that solar project that was trying to go in along 302, but kind of maybe directing it towards this telecommunications growth area or an industrial sort of a area seems like it would be less impactful on the public as a whole if it were, delegated towards an area like that.
And I believe, Kate, you talked about this area also potentially being like cluster developments, and is that something that also can take place in that area?
In which one, Peter?
That would be in the industrial area there,
I don't think we said that for the telecommunications. I think I kept that pretty simple because I know it's in a TIF. So we just said, there are existing commercial areas, compatible uses. So we're thinking commercial uses that don't generate a lot of traffic. So, you know, you don't want like a warehouse there. That would generate a lot of truck traffic. That's not what the town wants to see, but some kind of compatible telecommunications or sort of light industrial kind of use might be appropriate there, because especially because of the TIF.
Yeah. But all these uses are already, I mean, they're already zoned for all these uses, I guess is kind of my point. Like, we're making this a growth district, but to me, like, the growth is areas that we need to partner with the state on certain either improvements, or we are looking to encourage different types of development that currently exist there and that they're zoned for. So like East Raymond, this is all rural, I'm assuming, most of it, you know, and you know, if we wanted a sewer or if we wanted any sort of water investments, you know, those would be things we could partner with the state because they have to be in a mandated growth area. All this industrial, you know, all the scenarios we've just talked about are things that they can already be built there.
Yeah.
And they don't really necessarily need any town investment, and they don't need any state investment. These would be private businesses coming in. And I guess, to me, the growth areas today mean one thing in the state's mind, but the state will also use these growth areas to mandate future changes like LD 2003 and things we can't control. And I think that the more growth areas we have, you know, potentially we'll have more problems. And I think we should just be smart about where we're putting the growth areas.
So I'm hearing like the telecommunications would be more not looked at as a growth area, but as a peripheral area, or what's
There's a term transition we can use, which basically says it's not a rural area, but it's not a focus of investment
So
either.
as John's saying, really, it's status
Yeah.
quo.
Yeah.
So that
I mean, people can still improve it and build whatever they want to build there.
Yep. And then with the sort of western part of 302, I'm open to, you know, that was sort of one we weren't totally sure where the consensus came down on. You know, do we want more Sabre yachts, or do we want to just kind of let them keep doing what they're doing and not focus on that?
Well, I have Sean, maybe this is a question for you for budget finance. Do you know how much the commercial revenue of the tax base is compared to the residential base? And if we even doubled the commercial revenue, would that make a dent?
I can add, I think we have a meeting tomorrow, I believe.
Oh.
So I will get you that information if I can. It should be available.
There's obviously just a lot of residential in town. A lot of it's pretty high end, you know, being lakefront property. You know, we're talking about already somewhat occupied industrial and commercial spaces. If we were to, you know, even by an order of magnitude, double or triple that, is it? I don't know the number. So
I
that's
just tell you, I did hear some interest as far as the western part of 302, as far as a growth area being one where there is some interest. I have heard from residents of Raymond Cape, as far as similar to the idea of the East Village here being established. Would be great if they could, you know, get a tank of gas or a loaf of bread or a newspaper or whatever, maybe a coffee shop or a restaurant. We didn't have to wait 2 hours to get a seat, and so, you know, that would be why it could be used as a growth area.
As a village growth
A
area.
village, in other words,
We've been
another
saying
village.
growth area. I think
Another,
it's important to keep
another
saying the village part
peripheral,
of it.
another
Peripheral
peripheral
because
village area.
In one of the maps from our meeting had a little island of village at the, I'll call it at the juncture of Raymond Cape and 302, right?
Yep.
And yeah, it seems like that's a good model to hold on to, of having that little village for the Raymond Cape folks and others, just to and not and the industrial already goes out close to the line there, but so that village area would probably have to come back down whatever it is, Hawthorne Road or something, wherever it would be another patch of orange over there.
We'll take a look at it, and you know, I think we'll take a look also at Casco's comprehensive plan, which I think designates a growth area right over here.
Yeah.
I think their plan was based around a number of villages. I don't remember how many. They might have 4 or 5, but I believe this was one of them.
Were they calling it a village growth area? Because that's how Raymond's different from everyone. We've got village growth area.
I think they were just calling them villages.
Villages? All right, we'll have to talk with Casco then.
If I can make a quick comment, Jackie, I think you were saying where the yellow is, solar. Is that what you were thinking? Was that your comment?
Yeah.
I just want to make one comment about that piece. That's the yellow piece that's south of there. That is so close to Thomas Pond, which is the exact issue that we just ran into with this past solar project. So I would say that just to be aware of that south thing. I don't think that
Industrial uses close to the pond are kind of challenging.
Are they environmentally? Is that what the challenge is, or is it
just that the last place where they were looking to put that solar farm was just really, it says on the other side of Thomas Pond. Now it's, that yellow block right now is basically running to the same issue. So I would say that we want to be careful about putting solar there because that is right by Thomas Pond Terrace. So.
And so I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but they could, according to the ordinance that we have right now, they could put a solar farm there right now.
Yes, they could.
So it's zoned for it, it can be used for it. I think the question is more, as far as environmental impact, is to rely on our planning board and the citizens of the town to say, well, we need an ordinance that's going to provide appropriate buffer. That we, and then rely on the state to provide such things as environmental protection. But I don't know is we want to go on record as discouraging acquiring energy from the sun versus ripping it from the ground.
Well, I think it's incumbent on us to mention that a lot of the folks that have been big participants in the survey and showed up for the land use meeting live right in that little end red point off of just down a little bit at the end of the commercial growth in the west.
Sure.
And I keep looking at this big parcel up at the top of in East Raymond that's right next to Panther. I think, and then to John's point, where they're going to be looking at the planning board will be looking at this to assess what we are recommending for growth areas and potential zoning changes. So I think we need to be really thoughtful about what parcels are included in the neighboring parcels that are next to the areas that we do want to encourage growth.
I also, quick anecdote, I do believe that those solar developers pointed to the 2004 comprehensive plan in their argument for why it should be allowed. So,
Yeah, well, the plan is this plan is the underpinning of all legal authority that the ordinances of the town have.
Actually, I know this isn't part of the future land use plan, but before I forget it, maybe part of our goals should be coming up with that hierarchy of different sites and their level of, conservation priority and what would be allowable for certain solar ordinances. On this committee, we had talked about it doesn't make any sense to cut down a forest to put up solar panels. I don't think we have that anywhere in here yet. And maybe that should be one of these goals, is to create that. That's not within the purview of the committee to create that, but I think it would be in the purview of the implementation committee to.
That's a good
Great.
local goal. We can put that in.
Now, do we have any more really specific feedback for North Star? I just want to be cognizant of our time. I think I'm hearing like we're a little concerned about this area being a 302 growth area that's in the right there, that maybe we would like to see that be more of the village growth. Is that what I'm hearing as well? Are we a little
that maybe we
concerned
want to
about
move
it?
closer to the Raymond Cape Village idea that we had at the workshop, and we'll look at, I think this big one is Sabre Yachts, but we'll think about whether maybe the existing commercial then just transition. So we're kind of acknowledging that this is a commercial area, but
Maybe
we're
we could do sort of a little bit of what we've done on the other side of 302, where we sort of label that very initial, although there aren't many parcel or lines to sort of roughly follow, where we say that direct corridor we want to invest in, but then the rest is village surrounding it. I don't know if we sort of split it down the middle in a way. I don't know how the committee feels about that, if we're getting too nitpicky about it. But I think like we should be supporting growth there, and the idea of, as Peter was saying, a little village area. I mean, a lot of people from the Cape are coming up there, and then they're going down 302, and it's just causing more congestion. And I think small businesses could thrive in that area. So I think like having that being, I guess that being the village growth area, the same ideas that we have in along the main street.
Yeah.
Where we're saying that's where we want to see that village style. And even though we know that means growth, maybe, I know some people get hung up on that, so the coloring may be what makes this more palatable for people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we'll look at that area in more detail and go back to some of the feedback and think about how to do that a little differently. I think the other thing, and we can talk about this in future meetings too, is when I was drawing the East Raymond Village area here, there are some things that seem obvious to include. There are also some large parcels that I wasn't sure basically how deep we wanted this to go. Do we just want it to be along the street, or do we want it to go kind of another layer deep? So
Do we have to follow actual lot lines?
So you don't have to, and previously we never did because it's supposed to be a guide. It's just an idea.
Yeah.
It's a little easier to make it kind of blobby. But because of LD 2003, where they're regulating based on growth areas, basically we're doing it on parcel lines to avoid giving the code officer a headache later when someone is like, I'm on the half and blob of the growth area.
Yeah. I'm getting to the point where I notice, and I think this was one of the questions you emailed us, but there's no critical rural areas identified on the map, and I know those are coming. I think everyone would agree all of the shoreland zoning would be a critical rural. And I'm looking at the East Raymond Village, and I'm looking at those southernmost sites, and I'm thinking about the solar issue that we're just having, and all of those kind of border sites, and obviously that one is quite large.
Yeah.
That's more of what I was thinking about.
Okay.
But I agree that I would rather have some consistency and use the lot lines because it solves future headaches.
Unfortunately, that starts sounding like a zoning map, and that's the problem. The state will not accept a growth area map as a zoning map.
Right.
They're very clear on that.
Right.
And I just read one thing here, just for the budget finance people that are here, and this is in the checklist. Direct a minimum of 75% of new municipal growth-related capital investments into the designated growth areas identified in the future land use plan. So that's right from the state checklist. We can't be cavalier about identifying where the growth areas are, because it really is going to determine for a while what does and doesn't get developed with the assistance of the taxpayer's dollar. And I know that this committee takes it all seriously.
Right. So do you all feel comfortable with Sam and I taking this feedback on board, making some edits, and giving you, do we want to move forward with no July meeting? Do you want to try and reschedule that? No, you're shaking your head.
I think that takes a vote.
I think part of the reason why we need to skip one is to also stay on our budget target with North Star. So we have good reason to skip a July meeting. Maybe we have more particular assigned homework. But yes, I guess that's something we can discuss. There is also no reason, I think, why we can't meet without North Star. I guess that's an option.
I think there'd be a lot of summer people here, and I think it'd be a shame not to get their input.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Damn it. Am I sounding like Peter?
I do think if we do entertain a July meeting, it should not be the week of 4th of July.
Right.
I second that.
So I would just, say that.
10th.
Well, it depends on the room. When's the room available?
So maybe. So I think if the consensus is we'd like to have a meeting, we're going to have to do it as our own, and then we would have to decide, well, what is it that we're going to discuss in that meeting to be productive? without North Star. So like, I think it would be important for us to have like a legit reason and, you know, concrete reason that we're gonna be here and things we're gonna discuss. That would be my second ask.
Well, will we have the draft of the first draft that we could maybe give comments on a couple of the chapters internally and then give them to you?
Depending on what week you have the meeting, I think that's
We had it
reasonable.
a little like
Like in the second half of the month.
Second half of the month.
Yeah.
Would that give
have a
you
good
enough
account.
time to give us a draft? Because I think without something like that, for us to look at and maybe do more nitty gritty stuff and talk through a little bit more.
Yeah, and I would just say, Kayla, it seems like we've got plenty to review over the months coming anyway.
Yes.
Until August. So I mean, I'm fine either way.
Okay. Let's take a rough show of hands then. I see no other way to do this. Who would like to have a July meeting to go over the draft plan?
Well, it depends on what week it is.
Yeah.
It would be the second half of July. That's the best I can give you.
If I'm here, I would come to it, but
I'm getting a lot of
I'm
wavering
likely
here.
not to be here, so.
I mean, no one's really raised their hand.
So what we can do is give you documents to either send us back, maybe give you a deadline to send back written comment, or we'll have you comment online like we did with the inventory chapters.
Somewhere in mid-July.
Yeah, so maybe just a little bit of a stronger homework assignment for July. Does that sound?
That sounds manageable. And then we're
And
back
an
at
August
it.
meeting will still capture some of the summer traffic.
Okay, that was a rough, barely consensus, but I think we'll take it.
Momentum.
Because I'm not sure, I feel like we,
Unanimous consent.
yeah, we want it, but we don't really, I get the sense. So we've got about 10 more minutes, hopefully. So next on the agenda is our public outreach efforts for the upcoming election. So Peter had asked me to he was gonna give me some material and then I was gonna magically create another, hopefully will be a second successful pom-pom survey. So instead of really having to churn my wheels too much, I sort of took our first survey and I reinvented it. I guess I can do a little bit of show and tell now.
You want me to hold that?
Sure. But this is just basically, we're going to ask them a question. When RSU 14 returns Jordan Small Middle School to Raymond ownership, how should this building be utilized? And we're going to have 6 options: town offices, community center, library, recreation, daycare, and other. I'm going to take my little labels and I'm going to put them on my infamous mason jars. And they're going to be set up on the table with pom-poms. I think we can add to this a little bit. I think we had mentioned another possible question. The other, I'm going to have, I think the best thing to do would be to have little blank sheets of little pieces of paper that they can write their other on and stick in the mason jar in lieu of a pom-pom. But it'll be pretty simple, straightforward, not too much work. And again, I sort of just took what we already did and applied what Peter sort of directed me to. So I'm hoping that as a team, we have a consensus with this. But now would be the time to speak up if you have any big changes you'd like to see or
How many
things you'd like
pom-poms
to
you
do.
get? I mean,
I've ordered 900 and Walmart sells them by the hundred, so I can always make sure we have plenty. But I think like we went through 900 or so responses during a November election.
Correct.
I don't know, but typically the June elections have a lower turnout. Sue, is that typically correct? I was hoping 900 would be enough. If we feel like we are really super popular, which I think we are,
Kayla,
I
correct
certainly
me if
can
I'm wrong.
invest more in pom-poms.
Did we give 3 choices?
We gave 3 choices,
Yeah.
so we could, this can be handled any different way, and I'm sure that the people who are, ultimately this will be up to the people who are standing there sort of manning this. Do we want to give them, you know, like we did last time where we said, take 3 pom-poms and
pom-poms, that's the
give it your choice. I know Peter had mentioned maybe ranking it. That seems a little complicated because we'd have to pull out the pom-pom colors. They don't come like that.
Talking about rank choice pom-poms?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say we should.
Different colors.
Yes.
I can't do that math.
So, I mean, but I think just, you know, we could go with the 2 choices, and if it seems like we're running out of pom-poms, we give them 1 choice. I don't know, like, what's your most
you could
popular
also
choice?
pull. I mean, you could at some point pull the pom poms out and tally
Do a
them
quick
and
count and
start
throw the
over.
pom-poms back in. In fact, I think we actually did do that.
We did.
We did do that for the November election when we did this last, where we tallied and pulled some out.
I mean, I think I myself, I would vote for like 5 of those options.
I
So,
honestly,
Have a blend.
I mean,
don't
in
think we
all
should restrict
honesty, I have to be honest
of the
with you.
above.
When I look at this, the other is going to be all of the above. I mean, if I look at this and in
Or
all
sell it.
honesty, yeah, or sell it, we'll take the cash. I mean, because I just think it's a large enough building to do most of these things in there. To be honest with you.
You know, it's all to scale. I mean, how big do you want to do it? And, you know,
I mean, we could have a library that rivals all other
we
libraries.
could, if the town's priority is a
Yeah.
big library.
Yeah. But so I guess just real quick thoughts and comments on this approach. Are we down with it? Is it cool?
Okay, for the sake of time.
Oh, it's
I think it looks
If,
great.
if we think it's worth going forward, I've got a sign-up sheet here with some times.
Good.
I did it in at 2-hour segments. However, if you can only do 1 hour, that's fine. And I'm going to leave myself last so that I can fill in some of the gaps.
Okay.
Hey, Lynn, can you do you have a sheet to collect emails?
I'm sure we can pull one from a
I think I
previous,
sent you one, but I'll check.
like I'm sure there's
Yeah.
one I can find. So
And
that
then
was,
if you just pass that over to me.
yeah,
I'll
and
put
I'm
them on
sorry,
the
you
list.
at the beginning of the meeting had a comment about what we could potentially add.
Oh, it was
out.
the bus. Do you take the bus? Would you take the
would
bus?
you
I'll do
take the
anything
bus?
you want me to.
Yeah.
Just whatever you need to
okay.
Fill it in.
I'll do it.
All right.
So I've booked off
June
Saturday
11th.
to-
All right, gosh, it's so fun here. Next is, just a reminder, our next meeting date is August 7th of 2024. And just to recap, we are not going to have a July meeting, but we will have very specific homework. I do like the idea of giving us a document that we comment on online that worked really well for the inventory chapters. So next, comp plan committee comments. Do we have any tonight?
Just a real quick one. It's worth noting that LD 2101 was signed into law by Governor Mills on April 9th. So that's basically the law that increases the penalty for shoreland abuses. It's up to and including putting liens on the property. So, and I would thank the town. I would thank especially, I think, Chris
and
Hansen. He did a lot to support that, as the town leadership did. And it was actually, it was that Raymond case
Out on the
that
Cape.
actually made this happen.
Yep.
And we should be proud of that.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Oh, I do have one more thing. We are going to have a handout for the election that talks about growth areas. So thank you, North Star, for putting together some language. I'm just going to make this pretty.
Yeah.
And it'll probably look a lot like our last handout because I'm not interested in doing more work than I have to. So, but yeah, so we'll be a little handout so that we can further clarify what growth area means
And
or
I'll
could mean.
ping it once more. When we talk growth areas, are orange, right? The idea of village is important, I think, in that. 'Cause growth area could have a much more commercial flair to it than a village growth area. And if we're building a village growth area here in East Raymond to support school-age families as one element, but also, to have certainly shops, but we're not thinking so much large-scale commercial. We're not thinking large-scale commercial. We're thinking small commercial shops and services. So I think having village tucked in there is a suggestion.
Yeah, feel free to edit it too. I think
Yeah.
We say village style. I'm looking at it now, but you can pump up the village.
Yeah, I put a little reminder to
Yeah.
myself to maybe add some village language.
I've got a question for you, Kate. The implementation committee.
Yeah.
In your experience, what does that look like? How many years is that? How many members? Can you kind of give a visual what that may look like?
It can be whatever you want it to be. Some towns have implementation committees for like, I don't know, 8 years or something. I think Yarmouth had an implementation committee. You know, the lifespan of a comp plan is supposed to be about 10 years. I think when we start putting timelines on things, those short-term goals are maybe the ones that an implementation committee would focus on. You know, the size of it kind of depends on how your rules work. You know, there's not like some places have an implementation committee that will then make recommendations to the planning board and the select board. So it all kind of depends on how your town does that.
And Sue, that would have to be approved by the selectmen, having a implementation committee.
Just like this committee, same. John, sounds like you're ready to go. Great.
Depends on where I want for selectmen.
The committee would be appointed by the select board, yes.
Okay.
It would probably be along the line of advertising when you folks applied for a committee and trying to get more community involvement and get the word out as far as we can and have people apply and whatnot. So that's what's happened in the past. So I would assume they'd follow the same. And probably a lot of how that would go and how big the committee is, that sort of thing, may be based on what you put in the comprehensive plan, too, for what your goals are for that committee, I would assume.
Isn't the idea to have somewhat different new people and new heads on
Typically,
new
I
lines?
think-
But some continuity certainly from CompPlan members would be critical to hold the line.
Whoever still has patience for it.
And Kate, correct me if I'm wrong.
Straw.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not an option. It's required in our comp plan that we have.
You have to have a section on implementation, whether that's a committee. I mean, the state requirement is really just like that. I think once every 5 years, someone will check in on the comp plan. So, you know, we'll write kind of a baseline implementation section for you, and then that, I'll make a note that should be one of the things you all comment on.
Sure, so it wouldn't be outside of the authority of this committee to set some sort of a calendar or deadline, especially if these comprehensive plans should be done every 10 years. So I'll, at the risk of repeating myself, in the 2004 there were 104 recommendations, 104, of which I believe about 35 or 40 were actually implemented over the 8 years that the committee met. And so understand that if it's implementation, first of all, it's much better to set priorities and keep a more reasonable expectation about what are the key issues. And number two is, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to say that you're going to do it in a couple of years. So you're 24 months, and then, you know, that's added to another 8 years before you're doing it again. But certainly, having an implementation committee that takes 8 years when you're supposed to then start all over again in 2 years just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
So you're saying, Pete, we've got to queue up our absolute priorities, and that they're not going to be picking from the list what they want to do.
That's right.
Ideally, or they have some leeway, but we'd probably want to put some emphasis on this is 1, 2, 3, and those are and get to it, gang.
Yeah, I believe we have the voice in really determining whether or not any of these great ideas that have come out get implemented. And if we make it so arduous, the committee can't do it, then all of this has been for naught.
Yeah.
On that note,
Move to adjourn.
All right, do we have any other committee comment? I am not seeing any. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Excellent, and I
motion,
guess we
yeah.
can vote on that. All in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you.